In this episode, I sit down with Heather Z as she shares her amazing story of miracles and healing and so much more. You guys are not going to want to miss it, so check it out. Hey guys, welcome back to the Rebecca Weiss Podcast. I am joined today with someone I love, Heather Z, co-founder of Z Ministries with her and her husband, Joseph, who we've also had on the program. But now we get to talk to Heather.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
You know I love you, and I'm excited to sit down and hear some stories. So today we're going to be focusing on, because there's so many things we could talk about. But today I want to focus on healing.
Yeah.
Because you've had a lot of healing miracles and experiences, and also having to believe for healing.
Yeah.
Which I think is hard.
Yeah.
Especially when it's, you had stuff with your kids. I can't even imagine as a mother. So I want to start off with the story, and then I'll have some follow-up questions. So tell me about, you were 12?
Oh, okay. Yes. So
We're going to go back to the way back.
way back. Yeah. No, there is definitely a difference between healing and miracles. So when I was 12, I was a gymnast, and I wasn't doing anything spectacular. My muscles were stressed, and I was just swinging. And on the backswing, I flung forward. I hit my head, and I heard my neck snap. And so what ended up happening was I broke C1, which is the very top. Do you remember Christopher Reeve's Superman back in the 70s, 80s? He ended up in a wheelchair as a vegetable.
I forgot about that.
I broke that vertebrae.
I know exactly. I go to the chiropractor all the time. I know exactly where C1 is, because a lot of times my C1 or my C2 is out. That's right up at the very top of the neck.
Yeah.
That's a really important vertebrae.
Yeah, the higher up, the more vital is for the rest of the body.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I broke my neck, and as I don't know how I got up. I honestly don't, because I took a girl to the park. My parents were meeting with some friends from church, and
Wait, you just kept going? After you broke your neck, you just got up?
well, so I blacked out, and she was crying, what should I do? I'm like, go get my parents. And then the next thing I remember, I'm walking down the street holding my neck back to the house.
No, you walked?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, no, there's a few things that happened that it was the Lord. So it was miraculous versus a healing journey.
Gotcha.
And so as I walked in the door, I said, Mom, I think I broke my neck. And she's like, yeah. But I was in so much shock, that was one tear, because I was in so much pain that I couldn't really cry. They get me to the hospital, and they said, we think our daughter broke her neck. They're like, where is she? In the car. They're like, you moved her? And they're like, she walked home. So they got me in there. And by the time we went through all the vitals and how many fingers and all the things, am I holding up? They got me into the CT scan, and I'm on a metal table. And as I'm laying there, they just said, Heather, we'll be right back. We're going to take some pictures. And honestly, they weren't telling my parents this at the time, but they were basically just waiting for my lungs to collapse, because when you break, it's called hangman's vertebrae. So when you snap that vertebrae, it controls your lungs and your breathing. So they just wait for you to suffocate and die, really, when that happens.
What?
Mm-hmm. So I'm laying on this metal table.
No.
And the next thing I know, they're like, Heather, we're going to take some pictures. Be right back. And I started to feel sleepy, and my eyes began to shut. And when they did, next thing I know, I'm looking at myself on the table. And I'm like, oh, that's me. There was no fear. But I died, and I passed, and I went and saw the Lord.
What? Wait, what? Okay, that's so much to process in my brain. First of all, I just feel like it was kind of cruel that they just left you on a table like that. It seems a little inhumane.
Well, they were taking x-rays, and I was going into a CT scan, so they were taking images.
So you had an out-of-body, you left your spirit left your body, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then you went to go be with the Lord?
Yeah.
Do you, remember much about that?
Yes.
Can you share what
Very
you
much.
saw?
No, I was altered. I was altered after that completely. So
That's so cool. I would not want to break my neck at all, but I would love to go see Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about it.
So as I left and I was there, I recognized people that I knew. So I could see people that were here, but I also saw people that I was kind of in this in-between space, if you will.
That's what so many people I talk to, they say that's where they go. It's like they don't go all the way in because it's almost like if you go all the way in, you can't go back.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I've heard that so many times where it's like, even when my dad had his trance, he's like, I didn't go into heaven, I was outside it. And I've heard that concept so many times. Okay, so you're like in this in-between place.
So I was in this home, which seemed almost like my home, but as I was looking outside, and I don't know how to say that a blade of grass is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life, but I was looking outside at these big blades of grass, and then off in the distance it was wheat. And so I just thought, I want to go see that. And I moved at the speed of thought. So I went through the wall, and then I was outside where the grass and the wheat was. And the next thing I know, I was compelled to look up. And I've heard other people say, I met Jesus. He's about 6 feet tall. And man, that was not my experience at all. I ended up going out there, and I was compelled to look up into the sky. And as I did, I saw these two huge hands fill the entire sky. Now, I know that Jesus spoke and he created with his word, but these hands were like galaxy moving, galaxy building hands that filled the entire sky. And they came down, they cupped together. And once they came together, I was sitting in his hands, and that's when he spoke. And it hit me right here as he began to talk to me. And I would respond what would be similar to just a thought in my head. So it really was spirit to spirit. I never used my mouth to talk. As we began to converse, I really tried to look at him, but I could only see from the shoulder and down. His face was like a brilliance and a white that I cannot describe. It was too brilliant. And so as he began to speak to me, I had a sense of family. A sense of husband. But he just began to tell me, I have assignments in you. Wow. That I've put on the inside of you that I designed specifically you for. And yes, we know there's 7,000 more just like you. There's others, but it's the ones who will say yes. Mm-hmm. There are many of us, but it's the Lord's looking for the ones that will constantly say yes. Yeah. No matter how hard it gets, no how difficult it gets, despair, Anyway, that said, he just began to tell me about my life. And so towards the end, he just said, I have built you and designed you for assignments and purposes. And so at the end, he just said, Heather, don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. I have you in my hands. It's time for you to go now. And I just said back, oh, sorry. Try not to cry. I just said, no, Lord, I don't want to go. And he just said, Heather, don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. I have you in my hands. It's time for you to go now. And the next thing I knew, my eyes opened and wind began to fill my lungs. And I went like this. And when you're 12, you don't know that C1 controls
your breathing.
There was a specialist in town in Minneapolis, Minnesota that weekend doing a expo conference, whatever, who specialized in C1 breaks. He forgot his pager at that very hospital. So he had to miss his flight, come back, and they're like, you're not going to believe it. We have this little girl in here who broke her neck. Can you come look at her vertebra or her C1 because we're trying to decide if we're going to put a halo on her or what. And he looked at it and he said, this is interesting. And my mom was standing there and he said, she absolutely broke her neck, but it's been fused together. And I know you guys didn't do anything. And so he said, and if it was a hair to the left or the right, she'd be instantly dead. He said, so this is going to have to go in the book of the Miraculous or the Unexplained and the miracles in the hospital setting. He said, but she'll be fine. Six weeks in a soft collar. And so her neck muscles could heal because I couldn't hold my head up. He said, she'll be just fine. And that was it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What an incredible story. Mm-hmm. So there's so much to unpack there. That's so cool about you and Jesus. I mean, I can't even imagine. You didn't want to leave. Everyone I talk to never wants to leave.
No. And it helps give you a sense of, I know where I come from. Because I didn't realize all the hardships that were going to come like in waves after that. Through my teens, my younger years, then into with children, everything from Allison dying in the womb to now she's here, and and my son with being diagnosed severely with autism to hereditary double renal kidney failure to I should not have gotten a kidney transplant, but that again was another miracle. Well, actually, it was more of a healing and miracle to walk out.
That was my next question for you. So there's the miraculous where it's kind of like this instant healing, and then there's a healing journey, which I would guess it takes time. And it's almost like God does a work in you through that process of having to believe.
Yes.
So for example, let's talk about the story about your daughter.
Yeah.
You said it so like nonchalant. You straight up just said your daughter was dead in the womb.
For 3 days.
I can't even imagine. I'm actually pregnant right now with our third baby. Yeah. And I can't even imagine the emotions connected to that. So tell us that story. What happened there?
So I was very much I had baby bump and everything. And I was experiencing pain, so we went in just to see, because we were such kids, babies having babies. So as we went in,
was she your first or your second baby?
First.
Oh my gosh, that's even more crazy because it's like you've never done it before.
Yes.
So it's a lot of. You feel pressure and you can be nervous because it's your first time,
Yeah, and just ignorant. But as we were in on the ultrasound, Joseph just said, "Hey, I'm sure you see some tough things in here." And we were young and dumb, not knowing the statements we're making. And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "What's some of the toughest things?" He said, "Well, sometimes," as he's running the ultrasound over my stomach, he said, "Sometimes there are babies that are dead, and I don't have the authority to say I can't say anything." And it was kind of like he was trying to tell us without telling us, like warning us what was going on. But anyway, after hours of being there, they just sent me home and said, "We'll have your physician, your baby doctor reach out to you. And and they didn't really even tell me what was going on."
That's weird.
Right. So we get home and Joseph's like, "I just feel led to pray. I'm just going to lay hands on your stomach." And he did. And he just said, "Baby, you listen to me, live." And he just began to speak life. And I'm like, there had been no movement for days. And I honestly did not know even then what was going on yet, because they just really didn't tell me anything. They just said, "Well, we need to just make another appointment, have you come in." I don't know if I missed it. I don't know if the Lord if I didn't hear it so that something wouldn't stick in my heart. Who knows? It's fear, doubt, unbelief, whatever. But he began to speak life, to live, and you live. And it was real short and to the point. And we went to bed that night, woke up the next morning. All of a sudden, I felt fluttering in my stomach. And then the next thing I know, I see a foot go across my stomach. Just hit me, just all across my motion and movement again. And then I got a call from my physician just saying, "Okay, well, we'll need you to come in, this and that." And I'm like, because here's what happened. And I'm like, too late. There is movement and I've seen her foot and she is moving again. And I even got a letter saying, "So sorry for your loss. We have grief counseling. It's not your fault." And they go into explaining about the chromosomes and everything. And just letting us know, "So sorry for your loss, but we're here to help you for counseling." And I'm like, too late.
What was their response when they found out that she was alive?
They just didn't know what to say. And they just were like, okay, well, I guess come in.
What'd your OB say?
She was she's a believer and she knows the Lord. And so she just said, that's about right. That seems about right, that the Lord would, just believing Jesus. And it was the blind faith. There's some miracles. There's not enough time for you to process everything versus a healing.
It's almost like instantaneous.
Versus a healing journey. It's a work of getting past this natural flesh to become fully persuaded in your heart that I know what I have. I know what belongs to me. And anything else, like with sickness, I got to a point that I got indignant with it because it's illegal. It is a violation against your covenant with Jesus, with what he has already provided for you. And when you get on the other side of that, and truly with healing, if I could sum it up in a word, with the impossibles, with having double renal failure, getting a transplant, which was impossible, to all of it, it truly just came down to having a revelation. And truly, like, I had a journey of reading the word and knowing it backwards and forwards and hearing healing tapes to the point of it was tormenting to listen to healing because I knew it all. But at the time I was seeing nothing change. And that's when I got to the end of myself and I just said, what is it? What am I supposed to do? I know these scriptures backwards and forwards. They keep coming to me every day on the daily saying, you're going to die, get your affairs in order, say goodbye to your husband and kids. And I'm tired of hearing that.
So you had the double kidney failure.
Yeah, I did.
And so you were contending for how long?
I was in dialysis for 2.5 years.
2.5 years, and you saw no change?
Nothing.
And so you kind of got to that point where you said, what do I do?
What do I do?
And
what is it, Lord?
And what did you hear from the Lord?
And he said, and the Holy Spirit spoke real softly. He said, you know what I want you to do? And I said, what? Tell me. I'm streaming tears. What is it? I know these scriptures backward and forwards, and I know I'm healed because it's already provided. And he said, get to know me.
Oh.
He said, don't know me topically. Get in relationship with me. Come in fellowship with me. Come and get so enthralled with him, with just him, and in communion and relationship that, you know, as you turn your eyes to Jesus, the things of this world grow strangely dim, as the song says. I became so in love with the Lord that I didn't care if I lived or died.
Wow.
It literally just outgrew all of the fear. It grew out all of the doubt to where I completely was altered to actually, I actually received a healing and walked out of the dialysis center. Unfortunately, I spoke to some people thinking, we're not telling anyone, and kind of in confidence, but their words were weighty. And they said, are you sure? You're going to die. Don't do that. Get back in there. And unfortunately, I was in a faith journey where I literally then had learned I had to put myself in a bubble with relationships. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be offensive, but every word, every minute, my life depends on it. And I can't I'm in my own revelation. I was working out a revelation. That's what I mean. Where I was in a place of becoming so fully persuaded in my heart of truly revelatory, not head knowledge, not book knowledge, not tech knowledge, but, you know, that rhema where it hits you and you know, and that's when you make the switch. And it doesn't matter what anybody says to you. It slides off like water off a duck's back. But you have to get to that point where your mind gets so in alignment with the Word of God that it doesn't matter what anybody says. You know, I was so fully persuaded in my heart and knowing and seeing myself healed and whole, even though it wasn't quite there yet. It came to the point to where I outgrew it, to where I literally became healed and whole.
So after you talked to those people, did you go back into the hospital, or did you just believe for your healing? And then what happened after that?
So if you leave a dialysis center for more than 2 or 3 runs, you're dead because your lungs fill up with fluid and you suffocate. But it was 2.5 weeks later that we had that conversation. So then, yes, I was flooded with, I had no symptoms. My levels were all good. But once I did that, everything came back. My ankle swelled up, my face swelled up. I was full of water. And so I immediately had to get back in there. And then it was like another year before walking it out again. And then becoming very protective in regards to my healing as I was walking it out, because I needed to protect building my own faith and not letting anything else, because I was so fragile.
So that was the lesson you learned from that encounter, was to protect my faith. Your faith.
Yeah. Protecting faith and believing God and knowing, because he's fully convinced. He knows what he did.
Yeah. So after that year, that's when you got the kidney transplant? Mm-hmm. Yes. And you've been good ever since?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I got to be honest. They don't tell you, but you kind of get crazy because of all the meds you're on. I was not myself. Like the kidney I received was from a very big man from Georgia, which I didn't know that at the time. So Joe would come in and he would find me screaming at the television, watching UFC, classic NBA, like the classics. I mean, I loved the Olympics with the Dream Team, like basketball. I was all about that and UFC. And I was eating hot wings and he'd come in and I'm yelling at him about hot wings. And I'm like, hot wing? And he's like, what is going on? So I changed a little bit. But they don't tell you do. They can't because of legal reasons, but you do come out of it. And most people, another thing they don't tell you is I think almost 2 years in, I came in and they're like, wow, you guys look really good. I'm like, thanks. And like, kind of, what are you getting at? Why would you say that? That's awesome. Thank you. And they said, no, you don't understand. Most people who go through transplant, about 80% end up in divorce because it changes you so much. And the change of taking on someone else's organ and all of the effects of the meds, it takes time and they can't give you a time frame because, again, legal reasons. They hope you come out of it. They hope you change. They're just glad you're alive. So it's a big process. It really is. So yeah, it was interesting. And that's a whole nother thing where you just work through the mind and work through.
And so you had to walk through, even after getting your kidney, you had to once again walk with the Lord.
Oh yeah.
And allow him to bring you back.
Yeah. And Joseph too, because he's like, this is not my wife, like, Lord, And
so these are the trials that the Lord, when you were 12 years old and you were in his hands, he's saying it's all going to work out, but he was preparing you for that hard road ahead.
And John Paul actually prophesied to Joseph about his wife.
Yeah.
And said, you're going to be a protection for her. But I've designed her for you because he used the same words, because I've designed you for assignments. And so when you know where you've come from, like I've had the great honor and privilege to be with him outside of this broke, fallen world. Mm-hmm. But when you have a revelation, like I know where I come from and I know I'm meant for a purpose and I know I'm designed specifically for those two things, there's nothing that you can't do. And it's purposed to help others to continue and say, come on, you can do it. We can do this together. And to get his lost kids back into the kingdom of God.
That's so powerful. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for being here today. And for more information on you, where can people go?
josephz.com.
All right. And I just want to say thank you for listening to the Rebecca Weiss Podcast.